was a child, the only reason I was ever punished was for lying. I may have broken a window or knocked over a plant, but I was not punished other than scolded. But for lying, I got 2 strappings, which I still remember. As a result, I tried to stay on the narrow road of absolutely telling the truth without wavering one side or another. There came a time when I realized that this was somewhat rigid and I needed to learn to go to one side or the other of absoluteness. An event occurred while I was in medical school. The only break of any significance I had from classes was during the Christmas New Year period. I took advantage of this by going home. The process was at the end of classes on Friday evening, I would take a streetcar in St. Louis down to the railroad station. There I would catch a train which took me to Pittsburgh. Of course, it was an overnight ride and quite miserable. Riding in trains was very uncomfortable. The seats were upright and could not be laying down to make myself comfortable for sleeping. And the train made the same clickety-clack, which seemed to keep me awake rather than lulling me to sleep. And the train smoke created an awful smell. So in my sophomore year, when Sam Teitelbaum, a senior, suggested I ride with him and some others to Cleveland and then take the road train home, it meant a shorter ride in a train. And it also meant that part of the ride home would be in a car with my fraternity brothers. The only catch was I had to contribute to the cost of gas and oil, which didn't seem to be too bad. So on the Friday evening after classes ended, my sophomore year, 5 of us piled into the car with Sam, and we headed home to Cleveland. We were all wide awake to begin with, but as we went across the farmland of the Midwest, we gradually stopped talking or telling stories and began to doze. Soon night fell, and we went through a number of small towns until we approached one small town where the stoplight was still working. As we approached the light, it was still red, and we dared Sam, go through the light. There's no policeman on duty at this hour in this small town. He went through the light And of course, he soon heard the siren of a police car which pulled up in front of him to make him stop. Sam got out of the car and walked to the policeman and met him as he walked towards our car. A few minutes passed. They were talking. We wondered what the damages would be when Sam shook the policeman's hand and came back to the car. And we started off to continue our way. We were dumbfounded. How in the world had Sam avoided a ticket? It was unheard of to be stopped by a policeman, no matter where, and to avoid paying a fine. We kept after Sam until he would tell us what happened. And it went something like this. The policeman said to him, "Do you know you went through a red light?" Sam said, "I'm sorry, sir. I must have been dozing, but you know, I'm a medical student, and I work in the hospitals around St. Louis University Medical School. You don't think I would purposely run through a red light and have an accident? You know, I've seen terrible accidents. I've seen people crushed, bones broken. And you know, I wouldn't want to have that happen to me and my passengers." The policeman, of all things, accepted his explanation, and so we avoided a fine. Several years later, when I was working as an extern during the summer at the clinic at the Allegheny General Hospital in Pittsburgh, I had the car and I drove along the Ohio River Parkway to get into Pittsburgh. As the road followed the Ohio River, it made several turns. At one of them, following the turn, I came across the light, but only after I had passed through some trees which had obscured my way. I knew it was too late to try to stop, but I went through the light hoping that nothing would happen. As I expected, I heard the siren and a policeman pulled up beside me on his motorcycle. He said, "Young man, didn't you see the red light?" I said, "Yes, sir, but I didn't have time to stop." He gave me a ticket and said, "Well, you can appear in court and talk to the judge." After I finished with clinic, I drove home. I was not very happy. I told my parents what had happened. Dad went to our attorney in town, in Alcapa, came back with the news. "John Stern says the judge whom you're going to appear before is named Judge Mean. Nobody gets off. He is certainly going to fine you." So unhappily, Dad gave me a blank check, and the day of the court hearing was a Saturday, and I drove into the court. My name was called, and I appeared before the judge. He said, "Young man, you ran a red light." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "What did you have to say to the policeman. I said I had no excuse. He said, well, what do you have to say before I give you a fine? I said, sir, I'm in medical school at St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri, and I work in the emergency room. You know, I've seen people badly hurt, crushed, and I keep that in mind when I drive or wherever I am. You don't think that I would purposely run a red light. I must have been off my feed or thinking of something else, but I would certainly not do that to endanger myself or anybody else. I wouldn't want to have anybody else hurt badly, as I've seen people in the emergency room. The judge paused for a moment, leaned over to me and said, I'll bet you see people who never come back to life. I said, yes, sir, I do. He said, well, be careful. Don't let this happen again. Your case is dismissed. My heart was light, and I drove home very happily. When I walked into the store, Mother and Dad came up to me and said, what did it cost you? I handed them the empty check. I said, it didn't cost anything. I said, come on, let's go to Frank's ice cream place. I'll treat everybody to ice cream.